Hello and welcome to Beer Club. I'm Luke, this is Beer Jerk, and today we are drinking Nectaron from Sprig Fern, which is a very important beer that we are drinking thanks to some very important people. So of course here at Beer Jerk we discover a different beer every single week and find out the story behind this, the history of the beer style, tasting notes, the people that made it. But yeah, some beers are more important than others. We've been going for about 10 and a half years now, so I think we're about 550 different beers that we've got through so far. So one beer a week isn't that many beers, but it's accumulative. Cheers. And talking of doing things for a long time, Tracy has been making beer for a very long time. So Sprig Fern is a brewery that came about thanks to an immigrant. So back in, rewinding a little bit, I think it was about 1983, Tracy Banner left school at 16 or so, near Liverpool in, I think, Wellington, and she got a job in the local brewery, and she worked in the laboratory, and she tested the grains, all the malt that was arriving at the brewery. She did data analysis and samples on it, and worked in the lab there, and she worked in beer, and then maybe a decade later, she moved to New Zealand with her husband Ken, and stayed in the world of beer. So working at Lion, and she did some really important work at Max, which in the 90s definitely was one of the few breweries in New Zealand that were doing interesting things. Even though at that time it already was part of the Lion DB duopoly, and one of the many things that they did in that time was to brew New Zealand's first ever fresh hop beer. So I think it was called Beaujolais. After, of course, the fresh French wine of Beaujolais, and that was something that was quite, completely never seen before, and definitely it's not as though it was a thing that was also being done in other countries. It's not as though there were lots of people in America or in Britain doing these wet hop beers. It was really extraordinary anywhere, and it was certainly the first one in New Zealand to do that. And when Tracy moved on to Speight's brewery in Dunedin, I think it's Dunedin, sorry, down south somewhere. She was the first ever female head brewer at that place, which is fantastic, especially as it is Speight's. And you think about all that nonsense about being a proud Southern man and all that bullshit branding that all these big breweries work on. But it was beer that was being made by a fantastically talented female brewer, and a few years after that, Ken and Tracy bought an ongoing concern. I think it was Tasman Brewing, and they swiftly changed a lot of things there and named it the Sprig Fern, a bit of an homage, of course, to English pub names, where it's always the slug and lettuce or the bull and dog or something and something, the fridge and flagon. So yeah, of course, good nod to New Zealand with Ferns, and they quickly started opening venues and then franchising venues, which makes them unique in New Zealand. And actually, it's not really a common thing even in Britain. There are lots of traditional real ale breweries that have tied houses. So you'll have Young's pubs or what am I thinking of? Fuller's pubs, and lots of breweries have, in fact, hundreds of pubs that are tied houses and that pour their beers in our taps for them. But that is not exactly what Sprig Fern do, although they do own some of their venues. I think there's 16 Sprig Fern tap rooms these days. They're mainly franchises, which is a really fantastic model. So it's really a great thing for the franchisees, but also for Sprig Fern, so they quite tightly control the what all these different Sprig and Fern venues are like. So they don't have poker machines, they don't have TVs. So it's kind of like the opposite to the, that traditional line bars and RSAs and those sort of sports type places. You're not going to find a TAB machine in a Sprig and Fern tavern. And they're all about neighbourhood bars and community bars. They're definitely not city centre type places. And of course, the fantastic thing for the brewery is that they're buying a lot of their beer. So they move a lot of volume through their venues. And it means that they can be a bit more creative and perhaps experimental. A lament I hear from a lot of brewers these days is that they are being tied to what the market demands, and the market demands lots of hazy pale ale. So they're not able to brew some of the more traditional styles or unusual styles or get experimental because people like drinking hazy pale ales, and that's fine, I suppose, but it does restrict you somewhat. So fortunately for Sprig and Fern, having their own created their own market, they can educate people on the delights of a Scotch ale, for example, and have all their venue owners and landlords and landladies telling people how about these different styles. So they do lots of cool seasonals. But this beer, Nectaron, is all about the hop of the same name, Nectaron, which is named after another very important person in the history of New Zealand beer, who is Ron Beatson from NZ Hops. And his work with sort of plant and food research and growing is extremely important and goes back a very long way. I think that I read he worked in hop breeding for about 37 years. Hopefully that is a right number that I read earlier. And he is a key person behind hops like Nelson Sauvin. Well, in fact, pretty much all of the fantastic New Zealand New World aromatic hops that we have been enjoying in the last 20 years or so. And there's a lot to it. It's really interesting when you chat to someone that is a hop grower about the product. As a drinker, you think it's just all about, the flavour, does it taste nice? But it's an agricultural product, and you need to think about agribusiness. So what is the yield of these products? How hardy are they to weather, fluctuating conditions? How hardy are they to different kinds of bites and predation from different kinds of insects? And what's the harvest season like? So there are just so many things that go into these hop developments. So this hop, Nectaron, actually sat on the shelf for a very long time. It was the sister hop to, I think, Waimea, I read, which went to market. This was maybe 17 years before Nectaron actually got a proper branded release, just because Waimea better suited the taste of the day. It had better alpha acids and was used more for bittering. And it's only in more recent times that brewers have been wanting to make beers that are much more aromatic. And of course, the beauty of this Nectaron hop is it's a single hop that does it all. So it actually does have pretty good alpha acids, and it is a solid bittering hop. But then it's just got that big aroma, big flavour. It's really well suited to hazies because of the sort of stone fruit and sort of passion fruit sort of character that it has. This really unique, it's a flavour of terroir, of place. It is a very New Zealand flavour. And this beer, Nectaron Pale Ale, was the first commercial beer to be brewed and released with Nectaron. Well, with Nectaron as a named hop. So often these hops go through test and trial processes where they just have a number and a code. But once it got branded up as Nectaron, and of course you will see that every time Nectaron is mentioned, it has the little trademark, sort of registered trademark logo. Because, as I say, agribusiness, New Zealand hops is a business, and in the same way as things like Zespri have trademarked certain kinds of kiwi fruit, that Nectaron is an owned brand and a product. And in recent years, it's been interesting seeing NZ Hops doing these whole branding exercises around the releases of some of these different new hops that have come out. So yeah, really great hop, really great all-rounder. For me personally, it's not as much of a superstar as something like Motueka or like Nelson Sauvin, of course. It is really good and great in its own right, and yeah, it always when I say stuff like that, it always brings me to mind the quote I read in an interview with Joseph Heller years ago when he lamented how every time he'd release a book, it got reviews, and he said, "Oh, it's not as good as Catch 22," and he said, "But Catch 22 tops the best novels of all time lists every year. So who has written a book as good as Catch 22?" So yeah, it is tough to be comparing this hop to these other incredible New Zealand hops. And also taste is completely subjective. So yeah, you may absolutely hate Motueka, but adore this. Yeah, Nectaron, clever name, Nectar and Ron. Do you get it? So yeah, two very important people that have both been very highly praised and awarded, and I kind of wish I had them both here because we could do a 3-hour drink along listening to both of the stories of these great people. But not to overlook the fantastic brewers who are working at Sprig Fern, putting out beers that are always good, and it's never a risk drinking a Sprig Fern beer. There is a reliability to their beers. There's that sort of repeatability and that sense of process. The brewers there, they're not fucking about. They're not sort of. It's not a place that's, you know, some home brewers that like chucking in a bit of this and a bit of that and experimenting. It's a brewery that is about systems and process, replication, accuracy, and just really honing things. And talking of honing things, so this beer was first released in, I think, 2020, and it's been, I think, pretty steadily part of their range since, but it has made some changes. I remember when it first came out, it was a strong pale ale, whereas this is a pale ale, and I think it's dropped a few, maybe points of a percentage. Maybe it's more like 6% when it first came out. But it's a pale ale. It's really easy drinking. I've been waffling on enough. I'm not going to explain to you what a pale ale is. I think you probably have got a good idea from our previous drink-alongs and previous pale ales that we've featured. So we'll chat more about that history and Burton-on-Trent and Water at some point in the future. Great work, Sprig Fern. Great work to all the growers out there that are making these great hops and developing and pushing the envelope. And in the same way as we often talk about how breweries are shrinking and the market is contracting, and there are breweries that are consolidating or getting bought or simply closing down. Obviously, there is a knock-on effect to the suppliers. So it was just a couple of years ago when New Zealand's hop growers could not grow enough hops. The hops that are grown here in our beautiful country were in such demand in Europe and especially in the States. There just was not enough, whereas that has contracted. So I think I've read that the market for New Zealand hops has contracted by about 25% in the last year or two. As always, if you know better than me, please leave a comment below and correct me. But I think that was what I read, which is no surprise whatsoever, really. There's less breweries, there's less people drinking good beer, and it is the good craft beers that use exponentially more hops than these macro beers. There's just so many more hops that are required to brew these sort of like delicious, tasty beers than your macro beers, where the majority of the profits go towards advertising and telling people about strong Southern men or whatever nonsense stories are being put out there by these big macro breweries. So yeah, whereas the profits and the turnover from these sort of craft beers go into ingredients and time and all those other very, very expensive things. So and of course, even craft brewers that are making really great, really interesting stuff are also looking for ways to be more efficient. So perhaps they're using less of these very expensive hops all around the world. So yeah, things go in cycles, and it will be good to see the whole market growing, including for all of the growers. Anyway, I'm definitely waffling now. Great work. See you next time. Cheers.